Good evening, Talking Fight Nation, and welcome to The Scoop. It's Friday night. It's been a great week of special guests, and tonight, I guess we're saving the best for the last. Is that how it goes, Champ? I mean,
pretty much.
This is a very substantial resume. I mean, it's stretched right across our screen when we put it on before. So this is going to be a great chat with a great gentleman with a fine career in boxing, running the gamut, as you know, more than I do. I'll let you introduce him. Why don't you go ahead? Start her off there, Champ.
All right. So we're talking about a man here whose involvement in the sport of boxing spans over 5 decades and still going strong. Arguably stronger than ever. He is nothing shy of a boxing icon in Canadian and in the international scene. My name is Bola Raymond Olubuwale, and this is The Scoop. Today, I have the esteemed pleasure of chatting with a friend of mine by the name of Russ Anber. How you doing?
What's up, Ray?
It's been a while.
It's been a minute, hasn't it?
Yes, sir.
You don't look to have aged one day.
Yeah, I'm fighting time. I'm fighting, I don't know what to say. I have this dream of just being that ornery old man on the street beating up other people's children for a long time. I'm good with that. I'm still boxing. I'm still living the dream. How you doing?
I am good, brother. I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. That was really nice of you to ask me to do this. And I appreciate your kind words as well. It's very nice of you. And sometimes I have to pinch myself as to how lucky I've been, to be able to have lived my passion and lived the thing that I love doing, and I'm still able to do it now. And all these years that I've passed in it, I'm lucky.
And you're still going. The momentum is actually picking up, it seems. You're in the corner of two of the greatest. Usyk, arguably one of the greatest cruiserweights of all time.
100%.
And Lomachenko, one of the greatest, period. Heavyweights for that matter. I don't care. He is nothing shy of a dynamo. And you get the honor of working with these people.
I think about that sometimes, I think about that dynamic of how many people are allowed in a corner and how many people there are on the planet Earth, and then how many people are in boxing. And, that I have one of those 4 places, and that's kind of special. And I think the thing that I'm proudest about most, Ray, is that I'm not there because of my good looks. I'm not there because of my pool playing ability, and I'm not there because I can do magic tricks. Though that's not the reason I'm there. I'm really there professionally. And for those guys of that stature, of all the people they have met and that they know and that they have come across in their career, surely you would think. I called Usyk and Lomachenko both his Olympic wins, and Usyk his Olympic win. I called those for CBC and TSN. I called those fights, and I remember speaking about those guys, and I never would have thought that I would be in both their corners. So it's funny how life goes. Boxing can be real funny sometimes, as you know. And in this case, like I said, I've been lucky, and they like what I bring to the corner, and it's something I'm proud of, because it means a lot to me that on the international stage, the world stage, with 2 fighters that, as you described, of how great they are. I'm not a guy from the United States that's from the mecca of boxing, that's from the inner workings of boxing. I'm an outsider, who grew up in a small town outside of Montreal. I'm from another country outside of America, and they choose me. I think that's pretty damn good,
You've done something right. You've done something right, to say the least.
I hope so.
And the thing is, it's not that you went and put your resume in They called you.
Yeah, that's the other good thing, And you know what's ironic about that? And I think it's the same. It's the same recipe that I used for the boxing equipment business. In that when I started Rival Boxing, it was very important for me as a Canadian company, Montreal based, which makes it doubly difficult in Canada. Right? If you're from Montreal instead of Toronto.
Yep.
I needed to make a product that was, I don't want to say better because there's a lot of good products out there, but at least as good as anything that's ever been manufactured in the history of the boxing equipment business.
By all means.
And we did that. And as a result, without spending, except for my own mouth, without spending any money like on advertising, marketing, because I didn't have any, the success of our business was based almost in its entirety on the quality of the product. So I think that's a little bit, I don't think I'm any better now in the corner, wrapping hands, doing cuts, preparing the bucket, giving instruction. I'm not any better now than I was 20 years ago, outside of experience. You gain experience,
Sure.
We all gain wisdom. But in terms of my ability to do something, I'm not better now than I was then, but nobody knew me then. Nobody gave a crap about me then. It didn't matter,
Fair enough.
Now it's, you're a little bit more in the forefront. So that's, it's kind of good that the reputation and the word of mouth sometimes you don't hear it for yourself, but others say it about you. And the end result is I got work with Usyk, Lomachenko, Beterbiev, think about it. That's 3 great fighters in the world of boxing.
That's an understatement, and it also, I think, is more of a testament to you, being that you have that ideology that dictates that quality comes first. I've told your name several times, obviously, but the thing is, when I can't remember who I was talking to, and we were talking about wrapping hands, and they had just seen you in. We knew you were in Lomachenko's corner, but we didn't know you were in Usyk's corner. And he just saw you in Usyk's corner, and he questioned. He's like, "Is he really that great?" And I'm like, "I'd have to say yes." You wrapped my hand once, and I still remember thinking that this was like it was almost as if you invented it. Now you're going off and saying how you haven't done anything different in 20 years. What you're not taking credit for is how great you were 20 years ago.
Well, okay. That's one way I look, right. Yeah.
So, I fought a fight where I had to wrap my own hands, and I wrapped my hands from memory, from what you, and honestly, and I loved Adrian Teodorescu.
Right.
And he wrapped my hands almost identically to yours.
Is that right?
Almost identically. It was, and I've had my hands wrapped at least 6 different times from at least 6 different people have wrapped my hands several times, sort of thing. But I am saying that the wrap was that unique. Like the two of you wrapped it, at least from my preference, precisely the way I wanted it. Stablemate and good friend of mine, Rocky Floriano, when we were fighting in Montreal, Adrian wrapped my hand apparently one way, and then wrapped Rocky's another way. He liked less padding on the knuckles. He wanted his knuckles to actually rip through the gloves and actually hit the guy. I'm like, okay, that's a little savage, but you do you. And no complaints on his side. So Adrian apparently almost had a holistic attitude when it came to wrapping hands. He didn't always wrap everyone's hands the same. But for whatever reason, the way he wrapped me, I loved it. And then that one time, you wrapped my hands. It was like almost identical, but it was like, again, it was like poetry. So I sing your praise often.
Oh, I appreciate that, Ray. Thank you so much. That's nice of you. I'm proud to have done that because I think I had to have been one of the first guys, certainly in Canada, that emerged with that kind of reputation. You know, that, oh, Russ does good hands. Yeah, Russ does good hands, you know, and I kind of took what I had learned from the old school guys that I had worked with when I was a kid, and I enhanced it. I made it better. I took pieces of what each one did and made it better until I came up with a recipe that I thought worked perfectly.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this or if you remember, a lot of people who wrap hands today, they prepare a pre-pad. Like they'll take gauze, they'll wrap it up and they'll make a pad. And then when they're wrapping the hand, they'll put this pad on there and continue to wrap the hand and create a pad in the knuckle area. That's not how I learned. That's not to say I can't do it, but I didn't learn that way. The way I learned was the way the old timers used to do it, and that was you would build the pad right off of the roll. You remember how I did that with you, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right off of the roll. I'm in Cincinnati one year wrapping hands. I was going to say the name of the fighter, and then it slipped my mind. Kid from Cincinnati. I'm wrapping his hands, doing this, and there was this old man. Old black guy was walking around. He had a cane and he was walking really slow through the dressing room. You know, he's hunched over and he stopped and he looked at me and he said, "Man, that's old school." And then just kept walking away. And I was like, "Oh, isn't that nice?" He recognized it, you know. So I like that. And the old timer recognized that. Davey Hilton Sr. watched me wrapping a fighter's hands many years later. After we started, and he right away saw me, he said, "You got that from Roger," meaning Roger Larrabee. And so Davey recognized it. So I'm proud of the fact that because I got started at such a young age as a trainer, I started training pro fighters. I was 18 years old when I started. I was younger than the fighters I was working with. And as a result of that, I was still able to make the connection between the waning years of all those great old school trainers like Ray Arcel, Freddie Brown, Eddie Futch, Roger Larrabee, Angelo Dundee, all those guys. I got to meet them because I started young enough.
Yeah.
Vinny Curto introduced me to them. I went to the Leonard Duran fight. I stalked the hotel where Duran was so that I could, not to meet Duran, I wanted to meet Freddie Brown and Ray Arcel.
Really?
And they were so nice to talk to me. And I'm just a kid, you know why? And everyone's chasing the fighter. I said, "This is perfect. All of you guys go there. I'm going there. You know, I'm going to talk to Freddie Brown and Ray Arcel." And I spoke to them. And I have to think that I'm one of the last humans with a contact, who's still in the sport, with a contact to that old school era, because everybody who's around now missed it. You know, there's myself, maybe Buddy McGirt, but there's not a lot of Freddie Roach. There's not a lot of guys still left who have a direct connect to that old school, those old school guys. And I still carry a lot with me of what I learned from them, especially of how to handle the corner, how to work in the corner, how to prepare the bucket, all these kind of things, whether it be the famous old school guys like I mentioned, or the Canadian legends like Tom McCluskey and Roger Larrabee and Georgie Drouin and Bernie Ewenson, all those older guys, you know, that I got to work with. And you know, I'm lucky to I've crossed a great span of careers that I've got to meet some outstanding people.
That's an understatement, especially when it comes to the world of boxing. I sort of adapted my methodology when it comes to wrapping hands with hand wraps. I took it from yours, and then I actually cerebrally justified the action, because I still remember having somebody wrap my hands where they got that mitt, that pad, and they put it on top, and then they wrapped it around to hold it in place.
Right.
And after wrapping it around, there was a whack load of material on my pad, which makes no sense. it's useless. It does nothing there. Whereas when you layer it, you put maybe one or two to secure it, and there's virtually nothing on here. So that's a whole lot of less wasted material. I hit hard. I need to protect my hands. Patting on my knuckles protects my hands. Patting on my palm does not a damn thing.
There's actually two schools of thought to that, Ray, and no one's ever mentioned this. So whether you did it by design or by accident, you touched on a very important point that I'll share with you, and I'll let you experiment with this, especially because you're a hard puncher.
Okay.
The obvious thing is exactly what you said. Oh, this does nothing here. That's not true. It actually does something, which is why in a pro fight, when we wrap a hand with gauze, even though we will layer or put a pad on the top, because you're using tape, you create a certain thickness in this area, okay, in the palm side. What does that do? What that happens is that allows you to be able to close your hand around something and prevents your hand from caving in when it gets hit. So it's like putting a bar or a knuckle or a roll of quarters in between your hand so that you can punch, so that the hand does stay solid and doesn't cave in. It actually acts as a support behind it. So it's not always, you don't always want to leave that empty. So it's just as important.
Now, I see that, and actually, for the longest time, I'd never understood exactly. You'd see it in movies where a person grabs a roll of quarters and he's knocking everybody out. I'm like, exactly what does a roll of quarters do for you? But what happens when I teach, and when I attempt to, I teach that you want to put your two knuckles on your opponent. So if I'm landing with my two knuckles first, it's braced with my hand, my arm, the whole 9 yards. If I hit with these knuckles, which Adrian used to yell at me for, that's when the compression happens.
But sometimes in a fight, you have the perfect intention to want to land with but the guy just got to roll his head a little bit or turn, and that changes where you end up landing.
Fair enough.
You know? And so there is a reason why it's done that way. So when I'll tell you a trick that Angelo Dundee, I'm not going to take credit for this. Angelo was the one who taught me this, and he's a friend of mine. I love the guy, so I want to pass this on. You know, that you can use it, but people today don't realize, people today want their trainer to wrap their hands. They want to do my gauze, they wrap their hands with gauze and then cut it off and reuse it again, I don't know why, but Angelo told me for training, the best thing you could do and the easiest thing to do, and you use as many as you need, is a Kotex pad. You buy a maxi pad, use a Kotex pad, just put it on top, add that as the wrap. Go. Simple. When it's finished, just use it a couple of times, throw it away, use it again. They're accessible, easy to get. They're the perfect size. They fold down, and what are they? They're gauze. So they make the perfect cushion that you're looking for, So, yeah.
How did you get your start in boxing?
Now, you told me we're going to be supposed to be finished by 9 o'clock. I told you I have to go shovel. I can't tell you all that. And if I tell you all that now, you're not going to watch the movie or buy the book, are you?
No.
Hey, listen, my first contact with boxing came when I was 10 years old. Okay. And it was just shy of my 10th birthday when Ali fought Fraser for the first time. The fight of the century, which really that's what it was, the fight of the century. And it was such a big fight that it was so big that people today can't really even comprehend the magnitude of what that meant. The same way that even though I'm a boxing historian, I cannot comprehend the magnitude of Schmeling beating Joe Louis on the eve of the Second World War. The upset that was, it shook the world to its core. What happened when Schmeling beat him, and then when Louis beat Schmeling in the rematch. Historically speaking, maybe two of the most important fights ever in boxing history. I digress, but this fight was so big in 71 that even kids my age were talking about it. And I remember I was out. It was in our house. I was in the backyard, and my friends and I were talking about it. And my dad came to call us in, and I said, "Dad, who's going to?" You know, all the kids were saying, "Ali's going to win. Fraser's going to win." You know, we're all talking about it. And I said, "Dad," I said, "who you think's going to win between Fraser and Ali?" And my dad responded, "Doesn't matter." He says, "Joe Louis would have beat both of them." Because for my dad, you know, Joe Louis was his hero, right? Joe Louis was the guy. So that was my first contact. And I'd say, "What do you mean, Joe Louis?" And he would tell me the stories of them listening to the Joe Louis fights on the radio. And then like a week later, getting to go to the movie house and watching the highlights or the fight itself that they put on in the movie theaters, right? You'd see it like a week later. So that was my first contact, and then kind of like just sort of disappeared and never really became an issue after that. Well, fast forward 5 years to the Olympics coming to Montreal. So it's 1976. The Olympics are in Montreal. I'm now 15 years old, going to high school. You know, wow, okay, it's the Olympics, you know. And boxing was on the big stage. Howard Cosell, the same guy who called the fights, the pro fights, is calling the Olympic Games. Yeah. And the Americans, of course, a dominant superpower in amateur boxing. The 76 team, arguably the greatest team that the Americans have ever put together. Oh, for sure. Buddy McGirt and I had a big, not an argument, but a big discussion on this. We compared the two greatest teams, which was the 76 team and the 84 team, in a head-to-head matchup of how they would have fought. And it comes out pretty damn close. It's like in a lot of them, it's pick 'em, you know?
Not the Cubans.
Oh, the Cubans were there. But I'm saying from an American perspective, you had Sugar Ray Leonard, Howard Davis, the Spinks brothers, Leo Randolph, you know? Okay. And they beat all the Cubans. The Cuban had Teofilo Stevenson. He knocked out Bobbitt or Tate in 76. I think Tate maybe. So, you know, like there was the Cubans, of course, were strong, but the Americans were a superpower. It was always America, Cuba, Russia. It was always those three that were the big ones. Yeah. So Howard Cosell is calling this, and every one of the American kids is getting a story, right? Sugar Ray Leonard had the picture of his girlfriend taped to his sock. Howard Davis's mother had just died on the eve of the Olympic Games. Like everybody had a story. The two Spinks brothers were two brothers who made the same Olympic team, you know, on the same team. I don't know if that's ever happened before or since. You know, all these stories, you know, the producers built these guys up to legendary status. I built a gym in my garage, you know, watching these guys. I built a speedball platform. I hung a heavy bag. I used old material to make hand wraps. You know, I had little skinny bag gloves like we could get at the time, you know, I got for $10. And, you know, like I built a gym. That's how much I loved boxing. That was the big influence. And then in November, the movie Rocky came out. And, you know, I think that pretty much sealed the deal that I was in love with boxing. And I spent the rest of my high school years loving boxing. And I was fortunate enough to meet one of my teachers who I asked if he liked boxing, and he did. And we started talking about it, and he started teaching me and training me. And that he set the path for my life without even knowing it at that time. So sometimes you never know how you could influence a kid. You know, you never know.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I saw a picture, and I'm just like, the life that I lived. You sitting with Boris, forgive me, I can't remember Boris's last name, the trainer.
Boris Gitman.
Yeah. And Teofilo Stevenson. And I'm sitting there going, how?
Yeah.
How did you get yourself there?
I think that was it was either, I think it was the North American Championships or the Worlds in Reno, one or the other. So we were at a tournament, and Boris was there, and okay, there's Teofilo. Let's sit down. Hey, take a picture. Yeah, I remember that. I remember it.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
he's arguably one of my all-time favorite all-time favorite athletes of, like, ever since I was a kid.
Yeah, you have to love him. And you know what? Boris Gitman was one of my all-time favorite humans.
I barely knew him. I barely knew Boris. Every time, like, just a stellar guy. He He's still with us, is he not?
I want to say yes, he is.
Yeah.
One who has passed, who was also one of my favorite humans, is Peter Showerman. And I love from Bramalea Boxing Club.
Wow. I didn't know Peter passed.
Yeah, Peter passed away, unfortunately. Yeah, last year, I believe.
Oh.
Yeah. Great guy. You know, he trained Dwight, and he's the guy who ran the Brampton Cup. He was the guy who instituted the Brampton Cup, you know. And I, when these things happen, and when I see, I think if I have a regret, or one thing that I'm going to want to put in my book, you know, if I write a book, is these people who came along and really made a difference in boxing, and how today, you know, they're going to find a way to screw up what this guy built. You know, they're going to find a way to destroy it. They just make it worse. And that, you know, it's sad the way all the success that Canada has had, both on the amateur scene and on the professional scene, because let's face it, Canada had a good run at, you know, on the professional scene, winning world titles and whatnot. And we haven't capitalized on that, learned from it, profited from it. Nothing. Well, just new people come along and say, oh, we're going to do it different now. Yeah. Yo, you're reinventing the wheel. The wheel's already been invented. Why you want to change this? You know?
You're absolutely right. Through this show, I've been asking, and that's one of the questions I pepper a lot of my guests with, is how do we make it better? How do we evolve the sport? Because at the end of the day, you will remember there was a day when Ontario was actually rather strong, especially in the amateurs. They had a very strong team, right up to the 90s. Actually, the number one team in the number one team in the country. And then there are no. It's not just that they're not number one, but they're just not, for a province of this magnitude, they're not representing at all. And what's going on? Well, my personal belief is that Ken Ayashi did a lot of damage to the sport in Ontario by making it so unpalatable for promotion on the professional ranks. Made it less kids were looking up at idols in Ontario and say, I want to be like that. We had guys like Mike Strange, like he's boxing royalty, amateur boxing royalty, going off and saying, I watched Sean O'Sullivan in the '84 Olympic, or Willie DeWitt, and that's who I wanted to be. That's why I trained so hard. We don't have that, or at least, no, I had that, but the next generation didn't have that, because at the end of the day, we're not. There's not a whole lot of action going on, and there's not a whole lot of representation going on, at least in the province. We are in a new era. We have a great new commissioner. He is pro boxing. I'm optimistic for tomorrow. I'm optimistic.
I hope so. I think that both problems were different. I'm not sure that there was an intertwined connection between what the struggles that Ontario faced on the pro scene as to what the struggles were on the amateur scene. The amateur scene, you know, the pro scene was regulation, and the amateur scene was politics, dictatorship, you know, want to be the boss, you know, we're in charge. You know, it wasn't about the fighters anymore. It was about the officials and the referees and what they could control and who they could control. It wasn't about the athletes. When I served for 10 years as president of Boxing Quebec, I really tried to make changes, you know, and I was, obviously that made me a board of directors member on CABA. You know, I wanted to make changes, and I remember talking to people saying, we're not evolving. We're not, the system is broken. You know, basically I described it as Boxing Canada was a building that was built on a really prime real estate property, but we've let the building become dilapidated. You know, we've let it run down and it's no more good. It's not even worth fixing it anymore. You're better to just tear it down and start all over again, build a new building and institute new things that brings us up to speed to where we are now, you know, to this era. I don't know if they've done that or not, but it was just too much politics in amateur boxing. Adrian, God rest his soul, I love him. If he'd be here, he'd tell you the same stories of the politics and the people that came up against, you know, within Boxing Canada. And I think one of the reasons why Adrian and I got along so well is because it seems that Boxing Canada, and they did this isn't something that was done recently. Because of my age, how young I started, I saw this happen before. We didn't respect and preserve and take care of those people who came before us and who built boxing in this country. Anyone who had success, we tried to crush them and, you know, stifle them, keep them out, and say, oh, okay, now, not allowed to have pros in amateur boxing anymore. Getting rid of all pros, you know, and like that wasn't, and it, although it didn't happen immediately, that decision resulted in a cancer happening in amateur boxing that we're suffering with till today. You know, it didn't happen right away, but when you got rid of all those guys that worked with pro fighters, all those people who that knowledge, that wisdom, you got rid of all, you wanted them out so you could control everything, you know? And I told this story, Jen Huggins put together a video Zoom conference during the pandemic last year. And I told her about the Russ Anber rule. And the Russ Anber rule was Boxing Canada had a meeting, and they determined that from now on, if you're going to travel with the national team, you have to have a minimum of a level 2 coaching certification. And the motion went through and everybody raised their hand and out it went. Well, after the meeting, they found out that I had level 2. So they changed it to level 3 because I didn't have my level 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's the Russ Anber rule, you know, to keep me away from, because what I did when my guys were on the national team, if they didn't select me on the national team, I just paid my own ticket and went there anyways, went on the trip anyways. They couldn't stop me from doing that, right?
Yeah.
They needed to find a way to stop you from doing that, so they put these rules up. And, you know, none of these things, when you try to stop people, whether you stop me, whether you try and stop me or stop somebody, you're just hurting the whole program. It doesn't do anything to enhance the program when you get rid of people. You know, you got to get people working together. You have to, you know, I know there's egos in boxing, but we all want to win. And I guess when you get rid of enough people, you know, if there's 10 people in the room and you get rid of 9 of them, that makes you number 1, doesn't it?
Exactly. Russ, I don't want to keep you any longer because, and please come back another time. I promised, I asked for 30 minutes. It's gone 35. With that being said, once again, thank you ever so much for coming on today. And let's do it again.
Ray, I'd be happy to do it again. I thank you for having me. It was fun to go down memory lane a little bit with somebody who's been there.
Thank
you. It's an honor to talk to you again. It's great to see you again. I'm glad you're well.
Thank you, sir.
It's been a long time, maybe too long. And Ray, I have all the respect for you in the world, and let's do this again. And I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Stay well, brother.
You too, my man.
All right.
Bye now. And that is the legendary Russ Anber. Wow.
Wow, what a gentleman. What a story.
No, he was a spectacular guy. I still remember the first time I saw him in person. I was training at a gym, and he was the head coach of Otis Grant, the world champion. And Otis was getting ready to fight Roy Jones Jr. And they used our gym as a training camp. I was like, oh my God, that is Russ Anber. I hadn't been on a national team yet. I was still in it. I was still a wee young amateur at the time, like young by my standards. But yeah, and even then, he was imparting knowledge on me, like little things, just little things, and that's the beauty of boxing. And he hit the nail on the head when he's talking about how we need the guys from yesteryear to help propel us forward, the new generation to propel them forward. Because at the end of the day, when that knowledge is lost, it's very difficult to come back.
Yep.
Very difficult. So,
and that is the scoop.
That is the scoop. If you enjoyed this show, please smash the like button and subscribe. It's your boy Bola, and that's the scoop.
Thank you.
Thank you.